Welcome to MetLife's 5th Annual Global Women's Leadership Forum. I am Elizabeth Nieto, Global Chief Diversity and Inclusion Officer. Over the past several years, MetLife has been focused on advancing women in leadership. This forum explores what this means for our company and its impact on our business. With me today is Michelle Halaf, President of U.S. Business and EMEA, and Executive Sponsor of the Global Women's Initiative. For those of you who may not know Michelle, he has led our EMEA region since 2011 and was named the head of the U.S. business this past summer. And just recently, Steve Kandarian announced that Michelle will also lead the global employee benefits. Michelle, you're a very busy man indeed, so it is great to have you here with us to kick off the forum.
Thank you, Elizabeth. It's great to be here to kick off the Global Women's Leadership Forum. When you asked me last year to take on the executive sponsorship of the Global Women's Initiative, I didn't hesitate. One, this is something that I'm passionate about, but I also recognize the importance, the critical importance of developing women careers, of having more women in leadership positions, in order for MetLife to accomplish its strategic objectives. I also wanted to congratulate you for persisting with this particular event. I know that in this day and age of unit cost initiatives and expense controls and the like, that's not always easy. But I also know from just talking to our associates how important this event is to them, how much they get out of it, how inspiring it is to them. So, congratulations on finding creative ways of continuing to persist with this initiative.
Thank you, Michelle. And I certainly know you've been a real advocate to the work that we started 5 years ago. So I know you are now responsible for the U.S. business, but we're going to start with your work around diversity and inclusion in EMEA and the progress and the impact that you believe has made in your business in EMEA.
Mm-hmm. Sure. So, our journey in EMEA started, I would say, roughly 5 years ago. Everything that we've done has been with great support from your team and the broader HR organization. We viewed this initiative in terms of building blocks, starting by winning hearts and minds. And that was important because I think in the past there were a lot of initiatives that had been launched, not only in this area but in other areas, where there was good momentum initially, but then those initiatives tended to fade, and we needed to make sure that this would not be the same here. This is a journey that we've decided to embark on as an organization, so we needed to make sure that our teams understood that. We also needed to make sure that all associates, men and women in the organization, supported this initiative and understood why it is going to help us in terms of driving employee engagement, becoming an employer of choice in the markets that we serve, and help us also achieve our strategic business goals and objectives. And then the next step was really around building an infrastructure that would enable us to, one, identify talent in the organization, and then offer developmental opportunities to make sure that women advance and are positioned to take on leadership roles and positions. Initiatives such as the Emerging Women Leaders, Developing Women's Careers are just examples of initiatives that have helped tremendously in terms of making this happen in EMEA. And then, I think there was also grassroots interest and support that was, I think, demonstrated through the women business councils that, I think we had over 20 in EMEA over, this period of time. A lot of great ideas came from those councils. And this has led to, I would say, significant improvement in the region. If we look at the percentage of women in leadership positions in EMEA, it went from 10% in 2012 to 25% in 2016. We didn't have any women general managers in EMEA back in 2012. Now we have 4. 5 women leaders on our EMEA executive leadership team. 60% of promotions in EMEA have gone to women. So, I think this speaks to some of the progress that has been made. But we must also recognize that we're not where we need to be, and if anything, we need to redouble the efforts and, continue to be committed to continue to advance in this area going forward.
Wonderful. So, with many changes that are happening in our company and going through the transformation, there are a lot of priorities that are exposed to our senior leaders. So how do you think that we continue to engage the development of women as one of the priorities for MedLife?
Yeah, so this initiative has support at the very top. I mean, Steve Kandarian and the entire AG are fully behind this initiative and are interested and review the progress that we're making in this area. And I think that it's refreshing that with our refreshed strategy, this continues to be an area of focus. We continue to see this as a critical enabler for the company. I think there's a lot of great work going on in the U.S. business. I'm meeting tomorrow with the DNI Council here in the U.S., but I've seen some of the work that they're doing. And I'm also hoping that there will be opportunities to even more exchange best practices, in terms of some of the things that are happening here and in EMEA going forward. So I think there's a lot of potential to continue to drive this going forward, and very much looking forward to that.
So when you started talking about diversity and inclusion in EMEA, one of the alignment was around innovation, and I know that innovation continues to be an important priority for our transformation. You want to talk about that a little bit?
Sure, and I think when we think about transformation, when we think about change, change requires open-mindedness. It requires us to seek different, diverse perspectives. When we look at things, think outside the box, as we like to call it. And again, so the more diversity we have in terms of our teams, in terms of how we interact, how we think, in terms of the work environment that we create and that we have, the more we're going to be able to innovate, and I think the more we're going to be able to manage change in a manner that helps us, advance our business goals and objectives.
Wonderful. Well, I want to thank you for stopping by our forum today. I know you have a very busy day, and we really appreciate your support, not only kicking off the forum, but also throughout the year with our Global Women's Initiative. So thank you so much, Michelle, for being here.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Thank you for having me, and I'm sure you're going to have a great event.
Thank you. Thank you. So whether you are viewing live or on replay, this forum is a valuable platform for you to gain insight and help you unleash your talent and create new perspectives. Since we are now in our 5th year, we'd like to take a moment to highlight some key learnings from previous years. To help take us back down memory lane, here's Cindy Pace, our Global Women's Initiative leader.
Thanks, Elizabeth. I have to say that was such an inspiring and motivating conversation that you just had with Michelle. I mean, to see a leader who is committed and walks the talk is just amazing. Every time I could listen to him go on and talk about his commitment to diversity. I'm really excited to be here, and thank you all for being a part of this year's forum. We're looking forward to another great year, and I know we will empower, motivate, and inspire each of you. So I was thinking, let's start from the beginning.
Let's do it.
How did we get here? We're in our 5th year, so that means it's been 5 years. When you think back to the very first forum, can you share with us why you created the forum, and really what purpose did it serve? How did we kick this thing off?
So the original forum was created to bring together the most senior women to help us define the strategy. By doing so, becoming the ambassadors of what we just launched under the name of the Global Women's Initiative. The original 70 women attended, the attendees had now expanded to hundreds of women who now have the chance to participate through this media of the Global Women's Leadership Forum.
Wow, that was the beginning. And that was also the beginning for me, because when the forum was running, I was actually interviewing. And I got the job. Thank you, Elizabeth. Thanks for hiring me. And so that was the beginning. Now let's take a look back at some of the past thought leaders who shared valuable insights with us over the past 4 years.
Succession is the goal. We want to get more women to the top. For more women to get to the top, they have to have better business experience and skill. To have better business experience and skill, we have to ensure they get the opportunity to grow.
Conventional advice to women won't close the gap, because not only does conventional advice to women overemphasize personal greatness and engaging others, and is incomplete in advice around business, strategic, and financial acumen, but that advice is advice that enables the transition from career start to success in the middle. You take all those skills with you, but it's not the advice that moves you from success in the middle to executive positions.
Women desire purpose more than men and are actually better managers and leaders for enabling others to have purpose and meaning.
We developed a model just based on what we were heard. Yes, this was qualitative research, but we heard time and time again how women start with asking questions, developing a vision and goals, focusing outward throughout the organization, advocating both for the company's vision and then their vision of the change and how it fits into the company's vision.
Confidence is the stuff that turns thoughts into action. And I just think that is so clear and clean and brilliant for women, because it's not about swagger or bravado or dominating every meeting and being the person that speaks the loudest. It's about having a thought, and then the confidence makes that thought action.
By transforming myself, I transform everybody around me and my company.
Every time I watch that video, taking us back over the past 4 years, I'm just really touched. First of all, that MetLife has the ability to bring in thought leaders of this caliber, but also the time that they've taken to really share their lessons with us has just really been invaluable. So just to recap a little bit of what we heard, in 2013, our theme was Inspire, Build, Empower. What a great theme. I think we were on the trend of the 3-word theme. And then this was also the launch, as Elizabeth talked about earlier, of the Global Women's Initiative. That specific year, we focused on McKinsey's research, Why Women in Leadership Matter, as well as the key attributes that make remarkable leaders. Some of our board members even shared their individual journeys that year. So this was really special, and it was the beginning of what we would know to become as a very successful forum. We moved on to 2014, and in 2014, I think our numbers actually went up from the first year. We had about 70, this time we had about 80 women, and our theme was moving toward world class. We recognize the role that women play in business leadership, specifically the importance of women's leadership attributes in the 21st century. We talked about the role of sponsorship, learned about that, and why it's important in advancing women's careers. And last but not least, of course, the significance of business and financial and strategic acumen in mentoring women towards the top. In 2015, our theme was Power, Purpose, Impact. And for those of you that know us very well, you know who picked this theme, especially with that word purpose in there. What was so exciting about Power, Purpose, Impact is that we had recently sponsored research called The Power of the Purse with Center for Talent Innovation. We discussed the importance of understanding women's interest in investing their money in things that really matter to them, things that are going to transform themselves, their families, communities, and the world, as well as their roles as chief medical officers. We know that now that's a term. Women are considered the chief medical officers in their families because they make the majority of healthcare and insurance decisions. We also learned the importance in sharing the joys of power. Power can actually be a positive word. And there's something about having power where we can lead with impact and influence. We also explored the significance of working with purpose. Working with purpose increases our engagement as we foster deeper and meaningful relationships with our colleagues, our clients, and stakeholders. We also learn and grow when we stretch ourselves in our work, and we make an impact and add and create value. And last year, this was the first year that we took the forum virtual. I mean, we were so excited. We didn't know what we were getting into.
It's a lot of work.
It was a lot of work, but ended up being extremely exciting and motivating because this was the year that we were able to open this forum up to all MetLife employees. And we really walked our own talk in terms of inclusiveness. That year, we focused on our theme, which was driving change together and making a difference. We learned that confidence is the stuff that turns thoughts into actions, and as you increase your confidence as you take action. Another key takeaway was from the Eve of Change research. You know, this was about the process in which women lead transformation, and it carries us over to this year. So we're still driving change together. We decided we couldn't drive change together in 1 year. That was just, that was too ambitious. So we got to drive change together over the years. We're very strategic. And now we're focusing on how do we take that energy to transform the future. So the video highlights that you saw from our guest thought leaders from over the years will be made available on our GWLF channel on the MetLife Tube. Be sure to check those out. One thing I also want to quickly highlight, Elizabeth, is this year what's exciting about the forum is that we have new technology. We have the Yammer. We did not have Yammer last year, and we are on the MetLife Tube. So we're using the chat function in the MetLife Tube to receive your questions today that you have. So please interact with us as we work on this new platform that we didn't have last year. We'd love to hear from you. So now, how do we talk about 2017? What do we have coming up, Elizabeth?
What do we have? So 2017, we have now a unique opportunity, and that is to talk about transformation. Transformation is an opportunity for us as leaders to take action that can make a difference on our teams, our communities, our clients, and our company at large. Over the next 2 days, you will hear from exceptional women leaders with a variety of backgrounds, from leading with purpose and impact to thriving as disruptors. These thought leaders will share with you how they are driving change and transforming the future in their respective fields. I hope you feel inspired and moved by their personal stories, their expertise, their advice. After each discussion, our goal is that you are motivated to lead through change yourself and be at the forefront of your transformation.
Thank you for those inspiring words, Elizabeth. I think we're all framed around what we're focusing on this year, driving change together, transforming the future. We have an incredible 2 days ahead of us, and I'm excited for all of our experts who are able to join us. We have stayed true to our tradition in bringing the best in class, the best in their field, right here to MetLife for us to learn from. So throughout the next 2 days, you will hear cutting-edge research and insights on how we can create a vision for the future and thrive while driving change together. There's so much we can learn from our guests to help us become even more successful change leaders and contributors during a time of transformation here at MetLife. Now, during each webcast, remember to use the chat function on MetLife Tube to submit any questions that you have. Stay tuned with us.
Thanks, Cindy. It has been great to go back to all these years and the work that we have put together and the impact that it has made on our women in the organization.
It's my pleasure.
Good. Now it is time to focus on how we can transform the future. Joining me in this discussion is Dr. Amy Zalman. Welcome. She is a global futurist and the former president of the World Future Society. Amy is a global security futurist, author, and also a professor. Amy is dedicated to leveraging the power of narrative to accelerate transformational change by leaders and organizations. She is the founder and principal consultant at the Strategic Narrative Institute, which provides consulting services and training to leaders and institutions seeking to strengthen their ability to understand, manage, and leverage future change. Amy is also an adjunct professor in the Department of Culture, Communication, and Technology at Georgetown University in Washington, D.C. So thank you for coming here. She's also a member of the Board of Visitors at the U.S. Air Force University and a board of directors of the Council of Emerging National Security Affairs. Now, throughout our discussion with Amy, remember to submit any questions you have during the webcast to the MetLife Tube chat. Welcome, Amy. We're so happy to have you here. Now, my first question to you is what it is to be a futurist. How does someone become a futurist?
Well, in fact, there are ways of being a futurist, but there is no direct route. There's no certification. There's no school that you have to go to. The good side of that is that anyone can become a futurist and anyone can acquire the capabilities and competencies of one. There are, however, techniques and mindsets that most futurists working hold.
Good, so tell me about your own story on how you became a futurist.
Well, my inspiration, what has compelled me and the reason why narrative is in the name of my company is that the idea that we can write our own story, that things are not actually there out in the future, but ours to negotiate, has always been compelling for me. The real source of inspiration for me actually has been the story of a woman, my grandmother, very briefly, and her instruction, I think, on what it means to actually build your own future. In 1939, she was living in Sofia in Bulgaria. Mm-hmm. She was actually a Jew who had been born in Turkey and had recently been expelled from Italy with her husband. According to her story and our family understanding, she went to the American consulate, and although she did not speak English and although she had never been to the United States, she persuaded a consul there that she was in fact an American, and as a result, she and her husband and her son were on the last ship that left Europe for the United States in 1940.
Wow, what a great story. So she really built her own way of rethinking the future for herself, and on that way of rethinking the future, she actually changed the future for herself and her family.
I think that's so. What I take from that, apart from any personal inspiration, is that the way that we decide to see forces that are not entirely or even at all in our own hands doesn't necessarily change them, but it does start to open up options for what we might do within them, and that's something that we all sort of can take a lesson from.
So you talk about when we were preparing and having our conversations that we need to pay attention to the possible future. And then you talk to us about some of the critical trends that are encountering today and that we as people that live in this environment need to understand. Why don't you tell us a little bit more about those two concepts?
Well, the reason that that futurists talk about possible futures is it's a trigger, it's a reminder that actually any number of things could happen. In our daily lives, we tend to, like, let's face it, probably until the end of the day or the end of the week, we do more or less know what will happen, although the unexpected does happen. But the fact is, the further we move into the future from our own moment, the less certain we can become of what will happen. And that is because the world is a set of complex forces acting on the present. So that opens up possibility. It also opens up preparation. Being aware of possible futures helps us, I think MetLife would appreciate this, helps us prepare for what could happen. There are many trends, and anything that's happening to the human race is happening to women. But just to bring out a few, one trend that is tremendously empowering, can be empowering for women, I believe, is the ongoing fall of hierarchical systems. That can be frightening for large institutions and for companies, but for organizations that can harness that devolution, it's a real opportunity to actually create new forms of power, as Cindy was saying, and to open up the aperture for new voices to speak. Others that remain in our hands, demographics, to speak at a global level. So we know that by 2050, there are going to be 2 billion more of us on this planet. That in itself is striking. The distribution of that change and the way in which demography will change is relevant for women in a variety of ways. In the West, meaning in the Americas, in the United States, and Europe, and in some other developed economies, we will begin to age. Much of our population will be over 65. In the developing world and in poorer countries, there's a youth bulge. All of this has implications for the way that people behave in family and society and for policy. Automation in work is huge, obviously. It can be something, and so the discourse on automation has been really dramatic, I think, until now. We're starting to calm down, not talk about robots taking all of our jobs, and talk more specifically about the way in which automation will alter the balance of tasks that many employees have. On the other hand, those tasks, most sort of the lowest hanging fruit, the tasks most likely to be automated in the near future, look to be those that are most rote. In some contexts, those are jobs that are held by women. So the International Labor Organization recently released a meaningful study on ASEAN countries, for example. So this is something that policy can help, affect. Shall I go on, or do you want to keep?
No,
Okay,
I'm very interested. Continue.
We're about to enter a genetic revolution. It is absolutely mind-blowing, right? We can edit our own genes. But what I thought I might mention, since I was thinking about women, is something that actually concerns me, and it's not that new, but it will rise to new prominence, and that is the capacity to genetically select children. So, as I said, that's been around for a while, but it is likely to become more legal, more acceptable. And it matters then what sex of the child parents choose. It is said anecdotally that in the United States, people actually prefer girls. In other countries, it has been demonstrated that people prefer boys. But the point is that we actually need gender parity, sex parity. And so that's something to keep an eye on. We don't necessarily want individuals in the aggregate to choose exactly what they want, so we want to train each other.
So this is very interesting conversation that surpasses just the organizations and the economical implications of that, but some ethical discussions around that. When you think about our industry and MetLife, I know we talked about some of the trends that you believe will have direct impact in organization like ours. We talk a little bit about robots and the idea of some of the tasks are going to be replaced of entry-level labor now by artificial intelligence or other ways of doing that. What other things you think will have impact on our industry?
Yeah, well, in a company of 58,000 people, kind of every employment trend matters. So one is automation and automation robots and artificial intelligence. Another will be, and this is related to that, are what are the skills of the future employee in various roles, and what is MetLife's role potentially in not simply providing training, but perhaps education to people as our educational systems outside of the company change. Data analytics. So this is, in many senses, a data company.
Yeah.
We are about to be flooded with new kinds of data that is structured in new kinds of ways. Sensors everywhere. More and more content, audio content, visual content, content produced by users all over the world. All of it, content that flows off our bodies, from our watches, from our phones, from our movements, from our clothing. So I just wanted to, we're going to drown in it. So the arena of, and out of that, patterns don't actually bubble up. It's a difficult task, as you well know, to figure out which data and how to combine that data in order to create the algorithm for the product of the future. That is undoubtedly going to be a competitive and challenging arena, I would think. But it also strikes me that it's a real place for companies to champion female data scientists, female computer scientists, because they'll be needed.
To understand that. What do you think we should pay the most attention in this world with all this information almost attacking us from every single side?
Well, these are major trends. It's very difficult to pluck out one. I'll give you a few more that I think are relevant in the corporate space and for MetLife, perhaps. But what's useful is to start to become aware of these major trends and then to think about their intersections, because it's there where unexpected things happen, and those unexpected can be, we tend to think that they're bad, but they also offer opportunities. So where is the intersection of for example, more female data scientists, of employment needs and data analytics? Corporate social responsibility, a growing sphere, a growing trend, a place that may become important for a global corporation to step in, and this will go to ethics again. We're seeing it around us right now that corporations are being invited by forces to act in more political ways. I think that will be challenging and necessary, probably, for large corporations. And when you ask about what to look at most, possibly just the ongoing globalization of the world, the ongoing intensification of the connections between countries and regions and people matters most of all. So right now, I will say this as an outsider, I hope you'll correct me if I'm wrong, I would imagine that most of the markets of MetLife are considered fairly discreetly. There's Africa, there are the Americas, and so forth. I can't imagine a day, not that far in the future, where risks in one place will actually constitute risks in another. So what is MetLife's role, which must seem very far from this, in an epidemic, for example? We're watching a malaria outbreak that is resistant to antibiotics right now. So that is sort of seems at the far ends, but that's the far ends of the possible.
Yeah, that's great. So you teach at Georgetown University. So what are the three things that you can share about this strategic foresight, and what do you teach your students to be futurists?
Right. Well, hopefully they actually teach themselves and they guide themselves, but what I try to guide them to do is first to simply think differently. Once they become reflective and aware of their own thinking about the future, they discover a lot. They discover that that we all have a lot of received images that may or may not be true. That we all tend to kind of focus, when we are focused on one trend or one possible future, our apertures narrow, and so they learn to widen them and think across different developments. So they learn a way of thinking. They also learn more technical skills about what a trend is and what patterns in data do and don't tell us, and when to rely on them and when perhaps not to. They learn a set of applied skills, and those are, with the exception of some highly mathematical forecasting skills, available to all of us. They learn how to scan the horizon for new signals, which I'm sure is something done here every day. They learn to develop scenarios about possible futures and think about which ones are preferable for them or for the context they're thinking about. And if I could add a fourth thing, I think they walk away empowered. I think they walk away feeling not that they control anything, but that they have a greater say in how their future and that of their communities might unfold.
So when you read the newspapers, are they trends jumping to your face all the time?
I think yes. I think now that's horizon scanning. That's having a context against which you're looking for signals. I am especially interested in the way in which government and governance is changing. I see signals all the time that it's changing and becoming networked, and I think this is highly relevant for the corporate world, as I said.
Great. So if you had to give our audience one tip, what do they need to do tomorrow morning to start to think of their own future and to start to tell that narrative of the future? What would that be?
I think it would be
maybe more than one.
Okay. Well, it's not. I think it would be great if everyone woke up in the morning and said, the decisions that I make today have an impact on the way tomorrow unfolds.
The decisions I make today will have an impact on the way tomorrow unfolds. That's the first thing we have to do. Okay, perfect. What else?
Oh, there's more. It is, what can I learn about that I don't know much about? How can I extend my learning? Can I take maybe something that I know something about and allow myself to go to a lecture, listen to a show, watch a video, talk to somebody, read something that's a little bit foreign to me? And can I start to widen my vocabulary so that I see a wider stretch of the world, so that I see, because this is what futurists do, so that I see things and make connections that I might not otherwise have made.
So expanded knowledge on a subject that I may know a little or that I may not know at all. So becoming more curious of things that I don't know. And as a learning organization, we're always given the opportunity for our employees to take advantage, not just of the mandatory training, but really of all the aspects of the knowledge of the products or the trends that they can do. So that is fantastic. Again, for those of you who are watching us live, please, you can send us your questions or your comments through the MedLife 2 chat as I continue to talk to Amy about the future. So there's one slide that we have that you provided us. It was the future cones. Can you walk us through the future cone strategic narrative process, please?
Sure. Well, those are two different but nevertheless related things. The Futures Cone was developed in the 1990s, so that is widely used among those who do strategic foresight for a living, and it is a way of visualizing uncertainty, really, It is a way of looking at how uncertainty grows the further we get from our own moment. And what's interesting is that is actually true as we move into the past as well. We're less certain of the distant past as well as we are of the future. It is also a way of demonstrating what futurists always want to ask about, which are, as you say, possible futures, but also probable futures. That's useful. What's likely to happen? I mean, what can we learn from trends? Because there is actually a great deal that we can predict. And what, most importantly, is our preferred future. And so looking at this cone is very helpful in understanding that we, one, is the empowerment segment. We are not destined to have anything happen to us, but nor are we fully in control of what will happen. And so can we set a point in that range of possible futures? Can we remind ourselves to think about what is really unlikely but could happen? And can we figure out a scenario that we think would be productive if it did happen? And set ourselves on a course toward it.
Great, great. So we can use that cone to really understand, as you said, the possible, the probable, and the preferred, and see how an activity could go through the three different scenarios and see how they work through.
Right.
Wonderful. I have a question from the audience. So the question is, are there any specialties that help you learn futurist skills over others?
My inclination, that is a fabulous question. One inclination I have is to say no. Anything that anybody, because this is a way of thinking that is available to anyone. There's really no reason that anyone shouldn't think like a futurist. A second potential answer is any specialty that actually encourages you to think broad-mindedly. So in fact, the humanities and the arts encourage us to think that way. Scientific inquiry encourages people to think that way. But I do think that almost any profession, when you that helps you broaden, is beneficial.
So do futurists watch a lot of science fiction movies?
That's actually a very interesting question. They do, and some of them write it. I'll tell you an anecdote. I taught last week the work of a woman science fiction writer, a female science fiction writer. There are fewer of them than there are male science fiction writers, and although it was very much a regular futurist, it was a post-human novel with tech and all kinds of stuff, it nevertheless was depicted from a viewpoint that was a little bit different than male futures. So hopefully there'll be more science fiction in the future that helps us imagine from different viewpoints what kinds of futures might unfold.
We have, perfect. So we have one more question. It says, when looking towards the future, what do you believe will have the greatest impact? What science, what area will have the greatest impact with thinking of the future?
There are two answers that come to mind. One is climate change, just indubitably. Geologists now think that we've entered, another geological epoch. It's called the Anthropocene. It may be discussed here, but that anthro in the Anthropocene tells us that unlike any other geologic era up till now, humans have a role in, whether we want it or not, in how our natural environment unfolds. And so, as one person put it to me recently, we aren't just here in the environment, we now actually have to become stewards of it. And we know the consequences, we're looking at some of the consequences already of not taking care. The second is really technology. To be very basic about it, it does go back to computation and computers and digital, the exponential growth at this point of digital capabilities, which may turn into quantum capabilities at some point. Those are driving convergences in technologies that may ultimately actually be life-changing in quite a literal way as we start to digitize ourselves.
Great. So one more thing, we also have a slide that explains your strategic narrative process. So would you walk us through that?
Absolutely. The premise of strategic narrative, the premise of narrative, is something I draw from cognitive psychologists and neuroscientists. It's actually also true of novelists and artists, but all of them tell us through empirical data and through and now through some neuroscientific evidence that we humans experience reality as if we were characters in a narrative. Our worldview, our cultural apparatus, our filters, those are the basis on which we make decisions and behave all day. That tells me, and it tells others as well, that change happens when we start to change the way that we tell our narrative. And when we can start to change that, it means that we start to drive external change as well. And there's a kind of a loop. External changes, of course, are part of the way that we produce our internal narratives. So getting inside that loop is part of the process. And there are primarily, it's becoming conscious of becoming explicit about the fact that we have narratives and that we're acting in them. That helps us change. But there are all kinds of ways in which, say, in a firm's environment, that narrative can be changed as well. Everything from physical layout that helps us tell us how to move and where to move, to policies and incentives that help us decide to make decisions about our behavior one way or the other. But changing that narrative is critical, and in fact women in the women's movement starting in the 60s and 70s in this country may be great evidence of the fact that actually public narratives and large-scale ones do change.
Right. I would say that part of some of the work that we have done around the Global Women's Initiative was also changing the narrative. Can we have an opportunity as women to lead in this company, to take responsibility, accountability, but also be empowered to do that? And as we continue to change and explain how would that look like for each individual and for teams that happens to exist, and we act that way. Okay, another question. How might a futurist mindset impact the way we think about people saving for retirement? Okay, again, how might a futurist mindset impact the way we think about people saving for retirement?
Also a good question. Well, from the perspective of MetLife, not necessarily the person themselves, actually lifespan changes will be critical. All
our actuaries are thinking about what you're saying.
Right. So, it's quite impressive. And those lifespan changes are not going to follow the same patterns of developed and lesser developed countries that we might have expected a few years ago. They will follow rich and poor, but South Korea is expected to have, highly developed country is expected to have a very long, the greatest leap in lifespan by 2050. In the United States right now does not actually have such a good prognosis as we might have thought. For an individual thinking about their own retirement, I would imagine that you're asking some of those questions already. They are asking when is that retirement, and what is that retirement for? A really wide question, one that says, well, what about all possible futures, might ask whether the very concept or category of retirement It really, even right now, exists for some part of the population, and whether it will exist in the future, because retirement presumes a certain set kind of employment that you stop. If we are all living on a basic income given by a government or dispensed in a central way, what is retirement? If we're living in a gig economy, if we are employed and unemployed, if our concepts of what employment is change, so will our understanding of employment. So the widest possible net I could cast would say our life stages are really being jumbled up right now, and that in the aggregate may really impact what retirement means.
Yeah, I like your correlation and how retirement gets redefined in the gig economy, where not everybody will be expected to have a 9-to-5 role or be expected to be in a place every day to be to perform a job or to have an outcome and an impact on that. Great. So another question. It's a lot of questions. That's fantastic. The participation of our attendees. How do futurists account for unforeseen events? How does change your approach?
Right. That's a great question too. Futurists are constantly reminding people, hopefully not tiresomely, that there are unforeseen events. That as a matter of fact, although we plan as if events were traveling in a straight line or as if tomorrow will be like today, the unforeseen really does happen. I have had myself asked by people, well, how can we prepare for a black swan, or how can we identify them? And the answer is, by its very nature, it is not predictable. It's you have to almost think in physics to sort of, it's actually not predictable. It is the culmination of forces that came together in a particular way right now, whether they're a hurricane, whether they're a political event, terrorism or the like. They weren't predictable. So one is to sort of understand that can happen.
And is that a percentage of unforeseen, or futurists think that could be a high number of unforeseen events, or a low number of those?
Well, there may be. So one of the things that happens is that we sort of narrate them out of existence after they happen. We say, well, it could have been predicted if we'd done this, if we'd known that, but in fact we didn't, so we couldn't. Yeah. So nobody knows what the number is. I mean, that's the sort of the way they are. Sorry, something else slipped my mind. I was going to say it, but maybe we'll come back to it.
Yeah, no. So another question we have is, how valuable is the past to foresee the future?
Very valuable, very. It's very valuable. When we very first started talking, I think I remarked that the past is actually very difficult to see as well. If you think, we don't think that. We think we know everything about the past. But I think, for example, about the kinds of scientific discoveries that are being made today that are actually changing our story of the Earth and the cosmos. So every bit that we fill in about the past might actually change the way we understand even the present. So on the one hand, the past is valuable in the sense that we can, in some contexts, draw analogies to current situations. Well, what did we do? Yeah. What did leaders do in situations that were like this? On the other hand, it's instructive to remember that the past is not as full as we think, and it is also sort of uncertain. So a lot is happening up here all the time. That's the narrative.
And trying to
connect past, past, future, and figure out what's going on in the present.
Great. So you mentioned the gig economy. We have other question here. Can you speak more about that and how women are impacted by it?
Right. Well, current evidence collected so far, and that is by no means to say that it's comprehensive, is that women are less active in the gig economy, or benefiting less where they are active than they could be. the reasons for that are not in, and I hesitate to speculate. I mean, it may be because of other, it may be either because of ready assertiveness of men to participate in gig economy. It may be because of the balance of other responsibilities in women's lives. But speaking globally, right now, it hasn't been great. Hopefully all participants in the gig economy, as it grows, will find new ways to kind of gain benefits. I think of this with respect to insurance as well. You know, and safeguard themselves, because the things that make women vulnerable make men vulnerable as well.
Yeah.
You know, the question is, from a benefits perspective, what if the B in the B2B drops out?
Yeah. So for those who are not familiar with the gig economy, do you want to define that?
Sure, I'll give it a shot. The gig economy is one in which people do not have formal employment, but they have various revenue streams as an individual. So, and there, you know, some gig economies are good. If you are, you know, if you are a 6-year-old, did really well in, you know, in a white collar position, and now you've decided to do a gig economy by doing some speaking and doing some, you know, and doing some writing on the side and doing some consulting, that is a pretty good gig. If you are have never had formal employment and it's unavailable for whatever reason, and you're scrapping together jobs that are not highly skilled, it can be challenging. We consider, we'll see what happens to Uber, but I mean drivers in these platform companies to be members of the gig economy. It's characterized, though, largely by its uncertain nature and the lack of other kinds of benefits that formal employment holds. It's characterized in a good way by freedom, by the releasing people from a particular identity all day, and by really opening up some kinds of opportunities.
And giving some freedom to make decisions on how you spend your day. I think that the terminology of gig comes from the musicians who used to have, you know, one opportunity to play here, one opportunity to play there, and those were the gigs, and that's how the terminology comes to us. Well, this has been fantastic. I learned so much, and I have all my notes here. We also have the slides, and I really thank you for being here today. That was a great way to start the day. For all of you attending and viewing, you can also head over to the GWLF Yammer group. There you can ask questions, you can share your thoughts, your opinions on these topics, and we're looking forward to continuing the conversation throughout the day today and tomorrow. So please. Now, we'll see you back here at 1 p.m. Eastern Time for the masterclass on creating a vision for the future with leadership expert and best-selling author Sally Helgesen. Thank you so much.